have her get us started.
Are we good? You ready?
All right. Welcome to Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs. Diana, if you can please take roll.
Representative Berger. Representative Nemec.
Here.
Representative Obermueller. Representative O'Hearn.
Here.
Representative Pendergraft.
Here.
Representative Smith.
Here.
Representative Stivar.
Present.
Representative Wiley.
Here.
Chairman Brown.
Here. All right. Thank you, Diana. So the first bill up for our consideration today is actually going to be my bill. So I'm going to turn chairmanship over to Vice Chair O'Hearn, and he is going to run the committee meeting through this bill, and then we will move on with our short amount of time. I'm not sure that we will get to Purple Star Schools just for the Department of Ed, but we will attempt to move as fast as we can. So with that, Vice Chair O'Hearn, I'll let you put me through the ringers.
Okay, we can do that. Thank you, visitors, for coming. House Bill 57 is the first one up, Armed Forces Amendments. And as Chairman Brown mentioned, he's going to run this bill. The floor is yours, Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Vice Chairman, members of the committee. I have a whole bunch of talking points on this particular bill, but what I've decided to do is this is a very, very similar bill to one that we've already seen, and it's been sitting at the bottom of the general file. This is a very similar updated amendment to the Space Force amendments. Well, why did I run this bill instead of just letting Space Force amendments happen? Mainly because I was contacted by the DOD, and the DOD's liaison kind of said, hey, look, we need to clean up some of these amendments, and it's one of our priorities across the country is to get some of our state statutes lined up and have the differences recognized between uniformed services and armed services. And so that's what this bill does. We actually heard very good testimony in our first meeting that I was a part of prior to leaving this committee during the interim that this was a similar situation that our military department was interested in as well. But it does go into a lot more information than the standard Space Force Amendments bill did. If you take a look at your bill, it goes, I believe it's 20 pages long. And really what we do is we go into a whole bunch of areas of statute that already mention either military service or armed services, stuff like that, and we make sure that we're cleaning those all up. So with that, Mr. Vice Chairman, I will run through this bill. I will make this very quick, and I will stand for any questions as soon as we do that. So starting on the first page, you can see that we are going to be amending a whole bunch of statute in Section 1 here. And so if you turn over to page 2, that rolls right into Title 8, 102. This is our general provisions of law. This is where we actually define the armed forces, and uniformed services. And you'll see how those are laid out. So I want it to be clear here. This is where I'll spend just a tiny bit of time. Armed forces means the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Space Force, and Coast Guard. So I am encompassing the Space Force in here. Uniformed services means all of the following: the armed forces, so everything that we just mentioned, as well as the Army National Guard, the Air National Guard, and any reserve or auxiliary component thereof of any state. Also, moving on to page 3, it's the Commissioned Corps of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Yes, we do have those people here in this state. And we also have the Commissioned Corps of the Public Health Service. So if you think about our Surgeon General, they actually wear the rank of general. So they actually carry that rank, and that we would be recognizing that if they were here in this state as well. And then to E is any other category of persons designated by the President of the United States in a time of war or emergency. And that's just a little bit cleanup language that solidifies us with current law and national law. So moving into 1911-103, this is our military service member protections. We just talk about how we're going to define them, and what I'm going to do through this, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, is let you know that all of this from here on out is conforming amendments. There's nothing that's going to be changing anything except the naming convention of what we've got. I'm just going to hit the high points of what statute we're changing and where we're at. So 1911 is going to be that military service member protections, going all the way through and getting to page, looks like page 8, takes us to 19. Title 19 is Homeland Security. So we're changing some statute there in Homeland Security. Moving down to the bottom of page 9, we have 1914-106. This is Veterans Benefits as defined. Continuing on and moving to Title 20 on page 11. This is Domestic Relations and Dissolution of Marriage. So we have some information in here that we're striking out the uniformed member of the United States, blah, 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 again, conforming amendments. Then we hit a whole bunch of education. As this committee is probably aware, and any of those who's also served on education, we have a lot of education benefits that are afforded to our military service members. We just go through all of Title 21 and clean that up. So that goes from page 12 through 13, and then on to 14. At the top of 14, we have Title 23, which is Game and Fish. So our hunting and fishing licenses, anything that we have to do with the veterans there, we make sure that we correct that, and it says Armed Forces instead of military. Then on to page 15, Title 33 is licensure, and this is a very big one. I want to make sure that everybody understands. Over the past couple of years, we've done a lot of work in this body to do licensure compacts and also licensure reciprocity for military service members and their spouses. That's what Title 33 is all about, and we're just making sure that we're cleaning that up and we're recognizing all of that across the entire country. So we're just cleaning all of that information up. Moving through onto page 17 is Title 35. This one kind of struck me a little bit. This was underneath fire, and I'm like, what in the world are we talking about military for fire? But this is the Volunteer Firefighter, EMT, and Search and Rescue Pension Plan. And we have a provision in there that says that if they are to leave their duty station or anything like that, and there's a pension paid, they have to promulgate rules to allow for the uniformed service member to make sure that they're allowed that service time off. And then on the bottom of page 17 is our tax laws with conforming amendments there. And the last one that I have is page 19 on Title 42 is welfare and medical welfare. We just go in there and strike out all the broad language and just go back and reference the Title 8 that we have at the very beginning. And section 2 is the effective date of this. If you have any questions that I haven't hit, again, this is a very broad bill, really just cleaning up statutory language. There is a piece of paper before you that the Department of Defense has, their liaison has sent to me, gives you some talking points about why this is such an important role. But if you do have any questions, I would stand for any questions, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Any questions of Chairman Brown? Anybody in the audience want to come up and speak on this House bill? Come on up.
Mr. Vice Chairman, how are you today? Good. My name is CJ Young. I am here on behalf of for Colonel Johnston, Wing Commander of the Wyoming Wing of the Civil Air Patrol, Air Force Auxiliary Reserve. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm a state employee for the Wyoming Department of Corrections. I'm on leave. I'm not here in any capacity for the state. I'm here just as a volunteer for Civil Air Patrol. So today we just wanted to speak in support of this bill and the amendments and the definitions that are happening in House Bill 57. For those of you not familiar with the Civil Air Patrol, we are the official auxiliary of the United States Air Force and have been serving the country since 1941. We have about 34,000 senior members across the nation and 25,000 cadets. And in Wyoming, we have 173 senior members and 102 cadets. As part of the Air Force Total Force, we work to provide emergency support services on a national, regional, state, and local level, and we provide about 90% of inland search and rescue as tasked by the U.S. Air Force Rescue Coordination Center. We also help develop our future communities by instilling hard work, character, volunteerism, a drive for public service, discipline, knowledge, and patriotism in our young men and women between the ages of 12 to 18 with our cadet programs. And last year, nationally, we trained over 200 student pilots, donated 18,000 units of blood, and saved 151 lives with our search and rescue operations, including in the state of Wyoming. We're here to speak in support of House Bill 57 as far as the language is being updated, as many of our members are state, local, and government employees. And although the United States Air Force with its budget provides us with aircraft, vehicles, and many support services, our members are volunteers and have been since the days of World War II. CAP is about service to our nation and our fellow citizens. It is our belief, based on the language of this bill by the Wyoming legislator, that it would incorporate our members in the definition of uniformed services, specifically under the term auxiliary. This would allow our Wyoming citizens who volunteer in the Civil Air Patrol to help support their communities and nations for that up to 15 days without any negative consequences. In short, we don't ask for any special treatment in Civil Air Patrol. We only ask to be treated as other bodies who work to serve and protect our nation on a volunteer basis. And we would ask for your continued support and consideration in supporting the auxiliary in this definition. So with that, are there any questions for CAP or our role in Wyoming or anything like that?
Any questions, committee?
All right.
I have two.
Okay, yes,
You
sir.
mentioned cadets and seniors.
Yes, sir.
How old do you have to be a cadet? And when do you age out as a senior?
So-
My brother used to fly for the,
Okay, I'd be happy to answer that. Thank you for that question, Mr. Vice Chairman. Our cadet program starts at age 12 and it goes to the latest a cadet can enter is at age 18. When they turn 18, they could move to our senior program or they could continue to age 21. And at that point, they age out and have to become a senior member. So, but if you show up when you're 19, you join as a senior member.
thank you.
You betcha.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you for your time, hard work, and consideration this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one person online. Is that true?
Oh, question?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Committee, what's your pleasure?
Question. Move the bill.
Moved. Moved by Representative Berger. Do I have a second? Second by Stivar. Yeah, Nymek. End of discussion. Any amendments? Page 1. Okay. Question being called?
Okay, Representative Berger,
Aye.
Representative Nemec,
Aye.
Representative Obermueller. Representative O'Hearn,
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft,
Aye.
Representative Smith,
Aye.
Representative Stivar. Representative Wiley,
Aye.
Chairman Brown. That's 9 ayes do pass.
Thank you, Diana. And thank you, Vice Chairman, for indulging me on a very quick bill run through, especially for a 20-page bill. With that, we will move right into House Bill 38, Wyoming National Guard member referral. It looks like we've got all the military department here, and we have got some fun to do. So, General, Mr. Smith, welcome. Please introduce yourselves for the record, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Major General Greg Porter, and I serve as the Adjutant General for the state of Wyoming. In terms of maybe providing a little background, since we have such a new committee on this one, in the interim, I came in front of the committee and really expressed my concern about strength in the Wyoming National Guard and really strength writ large across the nation. Certainly in the last 50 years, this is the most difficult recruiting climate I think that the United States has seen. And I really started to become concerned about how we bring strength up in the Wyoming National Guard. About 2019, 2020, strength was going pretty well. The Wyoming Army National Guard was about 100% strength. The Air National Guard was sitting at about 94% strength, and that was a 4% growth over the previous year. So good, healthy growth starting to come on. Then a combination of several instances occurred, COVID being probably the most prevalent one, but certainly the propensity to serve, the ability to serve, depending on which data you may take a look at, only about 2 in 10, sometimes 3 in 10 of our young men and women in the United States are qualified to join the military, either emotional, physical, educational, mental, any of those issues are disqualifying for our military members. So if you combine COVID and you provide, you go down that our young people maybe don't see the service as necessarily their career choice, and the inability to serve, really we started to see a decrease in accessions into the military. And even in Wyoming, which has traditionally been, very, very military friendly and very supportive. If you take a look at 2020, we had about 545 members of Wyoming join some component of the Department of Defense, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, any of those. Back last year, that slipped to 300. That's 304. That large of a deal. If the Wyoming Guard was able to assess all of those, we still wouldn't be able to get after our strength. If we completely, if they all decide to join the Army Guard, that would be maybe would get us to where we wanted to be. Writ large, you can say we lost about 5% in force structure, or not force structure, in assigned strength. So the air is now sitting right around 90%. The Army's sitting right around 95%. So as we described this problem to the committee last year, we took a hard look at it. And what the two previous chairmen decided to do was form a smaller committee. Representative Stivar was gracious enough to provide his expertise. We also had Representative Henderson at the time, and then our team really got together and started to do some brainstorming about how we could do some actions in the legislature that could help that. The result of that was really 3 bills that ultimately came out. One is on the Senate file. It has to do with medical reimbursement. It's through the Senate side, and we'll probably get a chance to see it on the side here next week or the week after. But then there's the 2 other bills that came forward, and that was this idea of getting more fishermen out there to fish for our candidates. What this bill gets after is is incentive reimbursement. So any Wyoming Guardsman that provides a lead that gets enlisted, we will provide him with a $500 incentive to do that. The intent being trying to get after creating more fishermen out there for the less fish that we see in the sea. The second bill, which we'll hear momentarily, gets after the retention side of the house. The first goes after sessions. How do we get more? The other one is how do we keep those that we have? And what we came up with was, for our state benefits, with the legislature been very gracious to grant our guardsmen, rather than that just the member being able to utilize those educational benefits, to be able to give that to a spouse or a dependent. So that's the second part of that. So 3-prong approach that we took. We're going to discuss the 2 today. Probably, definitely those are my priorities as the Adjutant General to obtain those. As we took a look, though, at the specifics, there are some errors in the way I approached crafting those bills in terms of a full-time equivalency and the appropriation. The appropriation is significantly less than as we took a sharp pencil to it. I believe it's talking about 800,000 on this one. It's really closer to 215,000. And as we go through the bill, I'll have actually Mr. Smith talk to us about potential friendly amendment for your consideration and an adjustment to the appropriation. Sir, Mr. Chairman, I kind of will stand for questions right now if that makes sense to the team.
Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Porter, how many recruiters and admin staff do you have now on the Guard side and the air side?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiver, so on the Army side, we have 21 recruiters, probably another 5 or 6 admin staff, retention folks to that side. On the air, it's 8, I believe, right? We've got 8 recruiters on the air side.
Follow up? Is that with their admin staff, or is that just?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chairman, Representative, there could be 1 or 2 more, but I think that that 21 active recruiters, and then there's a couple of admin staff to go with them.
All right.
I can get you the details if that's important to you.
And the other thing in your briefing.
Go ahead,
sir.
Representative Stivar.
I apologize. Follow up. In your briefing from last year, sir, when's the last time the Wyoming Military Department has been at 102% strength, or has it ever been?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiver, to my knowledge, we've never been at 102% unless we briefly hit it when we reduced numbers. So I remember us being as high as 1,900, I think in some, when we had both battalions in there. And as it cut down, we could have been for a small bit, but it's continued to drive down. The only time I can remember us coming up to meet the recruiting is what we did in 19 and 20 on the Army side when we got to 100%. That's the only time I can remember recruiting up to that number.
Follow up?
Follow up, Representative Stiver?
With the COVID-19 vaccine being from the Department of Defense being done away with, in the meeting last year, you had like 53 in the seeking religious accommodation in the Air Guard, 13 transferred to the IRR, and 11 were being honorably discharged. About the same numbers, 62 on the Guard side and 69 refusing. Will this help your numbers in recruiting? And have you guys went back and talked to the 13 that transferred to the IRR, or the recruiters actually working that portion to get the recruiting back up?
General Porter?
Mr. Chairman, for the committee, I describe what happened with COVID and everything as a bathtub, a great decrease in strength. So if we see strength going this way, now we've got this bathtub that's coming. And that bathtub was created by COVID is one part of it. And COVID also led to people not extending that, they didn't want to continue in service, retire early. So even though you couldn't say they were directly attributed to COVID. I know that they were. We had more people leave than we normally do because of that mandate. To Representative Stivar's point, they've reversed the mandate now to have everybody vaccinated. We are in the process now of contacting each and every one of those folks to try to get them back. I'm not getting a lot of folks interested in coming back right now. At least in one unit, I know 1 in 10 may decide to come back to this. Now, I don't have service guidance yet from the two services on what to do with people who decide they don't want to return, even if they still owe a service obligation. I don't know what that looks like yet. But to your question, Representative Stiver, absolutely. Those are folks that have already, sworn the oath, have committed to serving. We're working each and every one of those to try to get them to come back.
Chairman, follow up.
Last one, Mr. Stiver, Representative Stiver.
Sir, on the fiscal note, I heard you bring that up because the numbers that were worked out for the payment, that'd be 1,616 recruits.
Yeah.
And the other question is the one part-time position. I don't see you needing that if you've got 21 recruiters and 5 to 6 staff.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Representative Stiver, I think to your second question, because this is a state benefit and a state program, I can't have federal folks administering that program, doing the auditing and that sort of thing. So that state position is really because it's state money. And so I got to keep the bright line in between those two. I'll have Chris actually go through the numbers that we came up with, because as you point out, as we did the same things like that, that's not what we need to get after. So with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman and Representative Stiver, we'll talk that as we kind of go through the appropriation.
Okay. Any other questions? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually have a few questions, if I may.
Certainly.
Talking about the state, do you know how much money the state spends as a gross total toward the National Guard?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergrass, 96% of the funds that come into are federal. So that's about 110, 120 million. We average on the state side about 4 million, 4.5 million, and I'll get you to the decimal points if you need to, sir. But that's roughly the differentiates.
Okay. Follow up.
Follow up.
Does that state money then go to fund the full-time positions primarily, or is that another split? Could you explain that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergrass, there are certainly state employees. We have 235 state employees in the Wyoming Military Department, but there's also the large portion of it goes to maintenance of armories. Once, particularly on the Army Guard side, once an armory there's a cost share between the state and the federal government. Most of our armies are 50-50. We do have a 75-25 as well. So between the benefits, the educational benefits, employees, armory maintenance, that's the bulk of state dollars.
Thank you. Follow up.
Follow-up?
The number that I found was 244, and that must be positions. And so if you're at 235, back when I was in school, that was somewhere around 19 full-time positions that are not filled. Therefore, that money is piling up, correct?
General Porter?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergrass, that one, I couldn't honestly tell you what some of those positions, like our custodians that don't get filled, we can't expend that money in other places. So, but I guess I'm a little unsure where I don't know what that looks like, sir.
General Porter, I think a potential way of looking at this and something else, Representative Pendergraft, is any money that is not expended in 100 series, which is salaries and benefits, if it's not expended, it is reverted back at the end of the biennium as well. So even if they're not expended, so as the general just mentioned, if you have a custodian, for instance, that works for the Wyoming Military Department, cleans that area up, they cannot change or reclassify that position without going through a pretty onerous, extensive process with the Department of A&I to change that position. And then once they're appropriated, let's say it's a custodian, for instance, let's say that custodian makes $36,000 a year. Depending upon what this position may have, there may not be enough 100 series to fulfill what this position may be asking for. So, but follow-up question?
Thank you. I do understand the tiers, 100, 200, 300, how that
Okay.
works. You've got to also understand, I come from an old school military background, which was adapt, improvise, overcome, figure out how to get it done.
Mhm.
We're talking about a biennium budget, and I'm just trying to understand how this works.
Yep.
So we just, less than a year ago, started a budget. Therefore, it would seem to me that on account, there would be the ability to pay these positions so that when you fill them, it was there. From a business background, if I have a large shortage and I have the money to pay those positions building up, as I characterize it, it seems to me that I should be able to pay for some sort of a boost to recruiting or getting them some help. It's a little bit hard and dangerous, I guess, to take civilian mentality and apply it to military intelligence. We've all heard the misnomer there. At any rate, if you could help me out, my problem, just to be blunt, is I don't understand why we need more money a year after the appropriation when you already have a number of 100-level expenditures unfilled.
General?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergrass, if I understand correctly, I'll take a stab at this. I can't expend those monies in any other place other than what the legislature and the governor authorized it for. So I have no program of recruiting incentives that is established unless it's done here by this committee. So I can't move money across those things to make that happen. Even though there may be dollars there, I'm unable to repurpose them for programs that are not approved by this body.
Any further questions before we go into the bill? All right, Colonel Smith, seeing that the committee, I'm hoping, has read the bill. I don't think we have to go fully in depth, but a cursory overview of the bill, page by page, would be welcomed. Thank you. Colonel Smith, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Chris Smith, an attorney with the Military Department. The bill in front of you is a 6-page bill. Really, the meat of it starts on the second page. We are adding a subsection to an existing statute, 199403, to create this referral incentive program. Starts down there on page 2 on page 5. So really, 5 through 12 on page 2 is talking about what we're trying to do here. Then line 14 and on page 2 on to line 13 on page 3 is really just establishing what we're trying to do. So we're only paying a referral for someone who actually comes in and signs an enlistment contract. So it isn't a lead where some recruiter will follow up. It's also not somebody who's already been to basic training and passed or gone to tech school and passed. We're trying to do this quicker to make it more of an incentive. So you bring a body to us, if they're willing to sign an incentive, an enlistment contract, the incentive will pay to that person who found that person. If they happen to break their leg in basic and get washed out, that's not the referring person's problem. We just want the person who's interested in joining the Guard. If something happens to him in the process, we don't want to penalize that person who brought us that body. So that's what these provisions talk about. And then on page 3, on line 6, we do have a reporting requirement where we will report to the Joint Transportation Highways and Military Affairs Committee each year on whether we're getting bang for the buck. Is there a return in the investment if this bill were to pass? So we can say, here's how many referrals we've gotten, here's how the money's been expended, here's what our strength looks like, with the idea that if this program flourishes, maybe it'll continue. If we meet our strength goals, maybe we don't need it anymore. So then down on line 15 and following, starting on page 3, we talk about some of these definitions, what a completed accession is, essentially somebody signing an enlistment contract. On page 4 at the top, the referral bonus is defined that it can be set by the adjutant general, but no more than $500 a year. The idea there is if it's wonderfully successful and we have more referrals than we ever expected and we're running out of money, we can drop the referral money, for example. So the adjutant general can set it, but it's capped at the $500. That's our intent to start with. Maybe $500 for each successful referral. The successful referral down on line 5 on page 4 is defined as identifying somebody who not already a member of the Guard that assesses, which is defined as signs an enlistment contract. And then you'll see down there on line 11 on page 4, the program, July 1st of 26 is repealed automatically. This is a 3-year program to help us get out of that post-COVID problem. If at the end of 3 years it's successful and we're seeing increased strength, we may come back to this body to extend the program. But we wanted to put a cap on it to see if this will work because we've never tried this at the state level. Then down on section 2 on page 4, as was discussed, we have this half full-time equivalent position. This was mirrored in Senate File 53, which is the medical insurance reimbursement, which was one of the other programs and what the general mentioned. We've been discussing how to do this. This was the way LSO and the chairman at the time came up with it. They put a half a person here and a half a person in Senate File 53. We need a person to run all these programs if they're all passed. One of the problems, I know Representative Pendergast was asking, we have to have an authorized program to have a body. Until we have the program, we couldn't put a body in the supplemental budget. So unless and until this passes by the legislature and the other programs we'll be also talking about, we had no justification to ask for a body. So we're putting it in the bill. We may change how we do that. We've been in discussions with Chairman Brown and Chairman Boner on the Senate side on how to do that. Finally, on page 5, line 12, is where we get this appropriation of $808,000 for the 3-year period. This is not a biennial number, it's a 3-year amount. We've crunched our numbers, and frankly, to admit to the committee, this number came about in the interim. I can't figure out where it came from. It's far too high. When we look at our current programmed accession numbers, we look at our current expected strength number, and we look at that delta, that difference, we think we only need this $215,000 which is what we would suggest might be an amendment for the bill over the 3-year period. Because when you look at the number of people we're trying to attract to meet our strength goal at the end of this 3-year period, that number of referrals would work. We're not intending to pay referrals to people brought in by our recruiters. That's their job. This is for other people to bring in people. So a hunk of our potential accessions will be not referral qualified because they're coming from our existing full-time recruiters. This is other people brought in, and that's why that number is less than expected. I think the 808,000 was every accession, every transfer into the state from a different body, which was not the purpose here. The purpose was new accessions brought in by non-recruiters that help our strength, because we're trying to help people be gathered, more fishermen, as the general said. So that's the appropriation that starts on 12 on page 5 and goes on to page 6. And then section 3 just makes the act effective July 1st of 23. And that is the 3 years of the program. It would be July of 23 until the end of June of, well, July 1 of 26. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions. I certainly have some data I can run through about how we arrived at the $215,000 number, if this committee is interested. But since we're cutting the appropriation in the current bill, or suggesting a cut by almost a quarter, I didn't want to bore you with the numbers.
Thank you, Colonel Smith. Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel Smith, now in here you said if they haven't been to basic, what about prior service?
Colonel Smith.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiver, if they are out and not a transfer, so they left active duty, they're totally out, and they want to come into the Guard, they would qualify. If they're transferring off active duty because they're trying to meet a military service commitment or something and coming to the Guard, they would not qualify.
So if they're out.
Go ahead,
but-
Representative
excuse-
Stivar.
Thank you, Chairman. Smack me once on the head next time. Mr. Chairman, Colonel Smith, so if somebody gets out, because it's a 8-year commitment now, if you sign on the dotted line, and they do 4 years, but they've got IR time, but they don't have a commitment to join a reserve or Guard unit, that person would be eligible if, I'm talking to Representative Pendergraft, hey, come on into the unit. That would work. Or is it they got to be completely out of the IRR?
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiver, the way the bill is currently written, it's not 100% clear, but our intent would be, in that case, they would be, the person who brought them in would get the referral. Because the IRR is not a current military, it's a status, but it's not a current military status. They're not in an enlistment. They're just.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Follow up, Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Chairman. So like somebody transferring from the Utah or the Colorado Guard into the Wyoming Guard, they wouldn't get this.
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Mr. Smith.
Representative Stiver, no, they wouldn't. So any of those kind of interstate transfers, any of the transfers off active duty to the Guard, that happens automatically because that person's motivated to find a home, to continue their military service. We're trying to bring people in who are not currently serving.
Representative O'Hearn, or Vice Chair O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Completed a session on page 3. I assume that's one of the, or 2 of the 10 that qualify, physically, mentally, psychologically, and have they completed MEPS? So they are capable of going right to basic training. Okay.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chairman, Representative O'Hearn, they would have been screened by MEPS before they can sign their formal enlistment contract.
Thank you.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, Colonel, good to see you.
Hi, sir.
I have a couple of questions.
All righty.
Have you had enough time since the reversal of the COVID mandate to be able to see how much effect there is on recruiting? Have you got any feel for that yet? I know it's been pretty quick.
Colonel Smith?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, it's really been too soon. As you can imagine, I mean, it's in the last couple of months. We still don't have all the guidance on what's going to happen with the folks who have that. But I'll pass it on to General Porter.
Mr. Chairman is right.
Certainly.
I think what we do know is the hole that we're in. That is very defined, and that's what we're trying to climb up. And that's what this purpose is. What we don't know is how much, if any, the COVID mandate will go on that. But because of the hole that we're in, it's a much steeper climb to get out of. And that's what this program is really trying to get after, if that makes sense, sir.
Follow up?
Thank you for that. That helps. And frankly, it makes the point that is rolling around in my head a little more acute, is that we really don't know where we're at yet. We've just had this COVID bathtub, as you describe it. We're coming out of it. We don't yet know what it's going to do. We just came off of another appropriation to fund you. And as I listen to the testimony, I'm not sensing that there's really so much a money problem as a policy issue. Has it ever been approached from the side of, rather than another spending bill to create another problem, that we simply look at the policies that are preventing you from reaching into those funds and using them in another way? Has that ever been tried?
General, I'll take a stab at that. So Representative Pendergraft, that goes into a much larger discussion on state budgeting. And that would be something that would be required. So in state budgeting, the 100, 200, 300, all the way down, you can always move money down, but you cannot move it back up. And then also, if you look at this bill, specifically on page, the last page, page 5, I'm sorry. We have a lot of language in our bills that has this language, and it says, this appropriation shall not be transferred, expended for any other purpose, or any unexpended, unobligated funds remaining from this appropriation shall revert. So when we set up a program like this, and we have many of them, their hands as a department and any other department within the state, their hands are tied on what they can do with that program. And very similarly with this program, that if not all the funds used in this 3-year program, that would all automatically revert. They couldn't stand up another program and transfer it around.
Thank you for that explanation. It's very helpful, Mr. Chairman. I stand by my conviction that this appears to me to be more of a policy problem than a money problem, and perhaps there's another solution. I just asked that question. Thank you.
Don't you agree? Any other questions? Representative Obermuller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, we reached the point somewhere in the thinking and efforts to recruit to that it needed a money incentive. So describe what was happening before you came to that. Were there efforts to talk to the troops about, hey, bring your friends in, we need some help here? They just didn't respond to that, and we need a financial incentive?
General?
Chairman Brown, Representative Obermuller, yes, sir, we have. We've traditionally kind of done that with some knickknacks. If you refer somebody, we'll give you a pocket knife or some of those kind of things to sort of to generate some interest in that. Frankly, we just weren't that successful. We didn't have created that many more fishermen. We were getting some. There's definitely, I think last year, I think we identified 21 folks on the air side that came in as an individual referral. We really are just trying to excite that system a little bit more and try to get more folks out there, make it worth their time and their ability to go out and do that.
Follow up?
Thank you. I don't think I'm trying to compare it to knickknacks. I'm talking in terms of persuasion of the people that are there that presumably love the military and the reason that they're there, and trying to raise their level of awareness and say, we really need your help.
Yes, sir.
Can you start bringing your friends in here? And the implication here is they just don't respond to that kind of effort, or is that kind of effort made, sir?
Before I let you answer that, I think it might also be important to touch base on how difficult the recruitment is, speaking to the 2 or 3 out of 10 that are even qualified. So if you can touch base on that, yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Overmiller. I mean, we're very interested in doing that. I mean, many of our units do bring a friend to drill sort of thing. I mean, we are very, I mean, it's the number one priority of the organization is strength. So we spend a lot of brain sweat and a lot of attention to trying to get that to happen. The fact is, there's just less of them. As I said, that delta of 545 down to 300, that's 200 folks that didn't decide that they wanted to join a military component of some kind. So that's one piece of it. And the other one is folks are busy. Folks are doing those things. If they will say hey, I love serving in the Guard and I love doing those things, but to actually get them out to go reach out and shake somebody's hand and say, hey, are you interested? I think that's where where the incentive side comes into it, sir, and that's what we're trying to get after. Now, at the end of it, we won't be successful on that. We'll see. That's why we really made it a 3-year program to try to be able to come back to this body and say, this is what we were able to do, and this is what we weren't able to do. But given that hole that we're in, I'm very motivated to try a lot of different things to get that strength back up, sir.
Thank you. Representative Stivar?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question I have for either one of you, in the slideshow you presented to the committee, reason for the decline in accession is the ASVAB score is too low. Have you guys started study groups teaching these kids how to strategize on test taking, that kind of stuff to get them numbers up? You know, personally, I've only known 2 people that couldn't pass the ASVAB.
General?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, Representative Stivar, we're a little bit prohibited in terms of trying to prepare young enlistees to take the ASVAB. They don't want us training those folks ahead of time. But ASVAB is becoming a bit of a problem because it's a little bit, you don't allow calculators in ASVABs, but I guarantee you that there are not many classrooms out there that doesn't have calculators in them. So what we're seeing is the ASVAB test and our students today, which across the country, their lack of attendance in school during COVID has really impacted them, much less in Wyoming. That's not been our problem. But ASVAB is something we continue to work with and to try to get better. As a matter of fact, I was just talking with the folks beforehand about how we get after the ASVAB piece to increase those scores. But you would be amazed at how many folks aren't passing the ASVAB now, which used to be a pretty simple thing to do, sir.
All right, committee. I'm going to get just one more question in, and then we're going to move on to public comment. We still have one more bill to get to. So Representative Pendergraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bearing with me. I want to clear the air just a little bit. I love this program. When I was in the early 80s, was getting into the Guard, they had a similar program, a headhunter's fee. I took advantage of it. And to a young newlywed starving, it was a big deal. So I like the program. I guess the question would be for both of you, if you could, and it's kind of a weird question maybe, but if you could rate from 1 to 100 how effective you expect this program to be, would you care to throw out a number?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, I mean, obviously I'm pretty optimistic because I think that $500 is enough to get, especially our college kids where that's enough. They get a couple enlistments a month. They're doing pretty well. So I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to generate some more folks out of this. If, the fact is it's a tough market out there. And so I'd probably tell you I'm 80% at how effective this is going to be given what's out there as a shot.
All right, committee. General, Mr. Smith, thank you so much for your time. Open this up for any public testimony. Yes, sir. Come on down. If you would please introduce yourself for the committee.
Mr. Chairman, committee, Dale Steenbergen, I'm President, CEO of the Greater Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce. I just want to give you a couple other things to think about regarding this bill. So one thing is I'd say it really has an economic development into it, right? So if you think about the military, They're either in total guard and active duty largest or second largest employer in the state of Wyoming, right? A lot of economic impact. I don't know if you caught it or not, but one of the things that General Porter talked about was 96% of this is coming from the federal level, right? So why is that important? I work, I'm on the advisory group for the Chief of Staff and Secretary of the Air Force, and when they sit down and look at where they're going to send basing, right? So maybe they're deciding to send C-130s to Wyoming or HIMARS to Wyoming. They have criteria for that basing. One of the things that almost always pops up on that criteria is strength of force, right? And so if we don't maintain that strength of force, our ability to get new iron to fly or to get new equipment in the hands of our troops is limited, and they're going to have a dim view of that. I would also quickly say, when we're talking about this, how effective do we think it's going to be? Retired four-star General Robin Rand, who was head of Global Strike a couple years back, we were having this discussion about retention, right? And he looked at me and he said, I'm competing against you, Steenbergen. Meaning that, look, we can't think the military that people are just going to do this. Certainly we want them to have that pride and civic duty, but at the end of the day, we've all got bills to pay, right? And so do they. And that this is a way to help that, solve that problem, put some dollars in our pockets of our men and women who serve this nation. And so I just remind you, as we move through these retention issues, I'll just speak on this one and let it be. But it is an economic development issue for the state of Wyoming. And I promise you, if you're in Saratoga a couple of years ago and the flood happened in your community and you saw those guys putting sandbags, you're hoping that we did enough from state level to make sure that we have enough people to handle what we need to do. They'll work night and day if they don't have enough people. And I'm proud of them for doing that. But let's equip them. And this is a tool that they can use. It's not very much money. And it drives a lot of economy in our state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Steenbergen. Any questions for Mr. Steenbergen? No? Mr. Winnie, please introduce yourself for the record.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County, 30 years active duty in the Navy, in the submarine world. But being a retired guy, I can perhaps talk a little bit differently than the General and Colonel Smith did. You get into the recruiting thing, that's important because they mentioned very quickly, but moved on, that maybe 30% of our young people coming out of high school could come into the military. And my experience in the submarine world is everything is technical. And then you have the other parts of the thing, when kids get into these large ear loops and other things like that, those start to bring in disqualifying things because of apparently, maybe the General's a better guy to specifically speak to it, but those big ear loops can be looked at as self-mutilation, even though the kids look at it as something neat. So those kind of things are important. And the General's talking about, okay, how do we get out of this bathtub? Well, there's some other things that are important. You get out of the bathtub, a guardsman, an air guard person talking to their friends saying, here's how it is really. Here's the boots on the dirt of what I'm seeing in the Guard. Well, why is that important? Well, there's things at the national level. The General talked and Representative Stivar spoke about the COVID inoculation thing. And that certainly was a big deal. There was a lot of people that looked at the COVID stuff and said, look, this vaccine, it's really just experimental. And it really was technically experimental. I remember when I went in, I went down the line. These guys had these guns that shot inoculations into you. I got 3 in this arm, 4 in this arm, and then another 2 in this arm as I went down the line. All of those were generally released for common usage. So there are those that kind of had a problem with that, but there's other stuff you've heard at the national level that hurts the military because of the things they say. I saw the 70s, the post-Vietnam era, and I saw race relations in that era. The military was fully integrated in 1947 by President Truman. Still took a generation or more for that stuff to work its all the way through the system, but nevertheless, you know, I saw that. And then throughout my career, I sat selection boards and other things where we made decisions about people's future. And in my opinion, the military is one of the most equal opportunity places in this nation. And yet you hear hype coming out of the Pentagon counter to that. Well, that's where this link of a guardsman talking to his friend saying, well, here's how it really is, and I think you'll like it, makes a difference to the general and the rest of his people. And that's how you get out of the bathtub. And then you talk, the other piece of this was the National Guard tuition benefits. I gather you spoke about the two bills kind of together. Those kind of things. I talked about technical training in the military. Well, families are technically trained too, and the ability of guardsmen to complete degrees, maybe complete a bachelor's degree, something I saw in my time in the Navy. My large ship that had a crew of 13 to 1,500, when we went to sea for extended periods, the Navy embarked civilian professors, instructors, whatever, on board to teach courses. Okay, and so these guys, you know, it's not uncommon for a sailor going up for E7 in the Navy to have a bachelor's degree because they use those stuff. Well, these tuition benefits, whether they go to the member directly or he can give them to a family, make a difference. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rennie. We'll get to the tuition one here hopefully pretty quick.
I'm
any
sorry,
questions? Yeah, you're okay.
I thought you had covered it too.
Nope,
Okay.
you're
Well,
okay.
there's my 2 cents. I don't need to come again.
Any questions for Mr. Rennie? All right, committee, thank you, Mr. Rennie. Anybody else that would like to speak on this bill? Seeing nobody rushing, I am going to close public comment. Moved by O'Hearn. Second by Berger. Committee, let's go ahead and walk through this bill really quick, and then we will open it up for discussion as well. I do know that we have at least one proposed amendment, but let's walk through the bill quickly and see if anybody else has anything further. So page 1 shouldn't have much of anything. Page 2. And just interrupt me if you guys have something. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5.
There's an amendment for on line 12, correct?
Yes. Representative O'Hearn, Vice Chair O'Hearn.
I make an amendment to appropriate $215,000, starting on line 12 and ending on line 13 on page 5.
So the motion is on line 13 to strike 808,000 and insert 215,000. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Representative Wiley on the second on that. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing no question on the amendment, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Moving from page 5 to page 6. Do not have anything there. Any discussion on the bill?
Question.
Question being called. Diana, can you please call roll?
Representative Berger,
Aye.
Representative Neatmick,
Aye.
Representative Obermueller, Representative O'Hearn,
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft,
Nay.
Representative Smith,
Nay.
Representative Stivar,
No.
Representative Wiley,
Yay.
Chairman Brown.
Aye. That's all right.
6 ayes and 3 noes do pass with amendments.
Thank you, Diana. All right. Vice Chair O'Hearn, would you mind carrying this one on the floor for me? Just in case I'm not on the floor like I was yesterday and I have to be bailed out by you again.
Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, we are going to move on. Committee, I am going to ask the general and the colonel to keep their comments as short and sweet as possible. We've got 15-ish minutes to get moving. This is a very important bill, however. So if you do have questions, please make sure what we'll do is we'll stop you guys in the middle if anybody has a question, okay? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What this particular bill goes after is the retention side of the house here. And what we were trying to get is the ability to keep some of our own people. Legislature's been very gracious in giving some benefits to our guardsmen. One of these is the educational benefit, which allows you to get a bachelor's degree. One of the things that we came up with in the interim was that right now only the member is authorized that. Well, those of you know, we enlist individuals, we enlist members, but we retain families. And the ability for our families to support our soldiers and airmen as they keep going on is critical. So one of the things that we thought we would do is if you could transfer this benefit that either you're not going to use to your spouse or a child, in exchange for an extension of at least 6 years in the in the Wyoming National Guard, that would be a good thing. This is particularly for Wyoming schools. So it's only effective in schools in Wyoming, our community colleges, and the University of Wyoming, and it really gets after trying to get our spouses and our dependents education benefits that the member has earned in service to the state and nation. And if in the interest of time, I'll stop there and answer any questions that we get going forward, sir.
Thank you, General. Appreciate that. Any questions for the General up front? Okay. Representative Stivar? Good. Okay. All right. Colonel Smith, if you'll walk us through the bill, or Mr. Smith, retired colonel. I'm going to keep screwing that up as long as you're with us, so.
Mr. Chairman, I answer to a lot of things, and those are nicer than some. So in front of the committee is House Bill 59. It is an 8-page bill. Came out of the interim. It was an interim topic. It is an interim committee bill. As explained, it extends an already existing educational assistance program. Currently in 19.9.501, we have an educational assistance that allows members to attend a Wyoming school and get tuition assistance. That program has been in place since 2009. It is probably the number one thing that people who come to us as new recruits, especially those without any family military experience, they say that's one of their biggest reasons for joining the Guard is they do get this educational assistance. What this bill does, again, coming out of the interim, the idea was what can we do to help retain people? The current educational assistance program pays for 1 degree. So if you come to the Guard with a degree, you can get a second degree in some cases, but by and large, the member really can't use the program. When I came to the Guard with my Juris Doctor degree and a bachelor's degree, it was of no benefit to me. So in the interim, the same committee mentioned earlier, of which Representative Stivar and Representative Henderson were part of, in trying to come up with ways to help retain people, we came up with this program where if you are not using the benefit yourself as a military member, you could transfer it to your spouse or another of your dependents. So when you look at the bill, we're changing a variety of the sections in 19.9.501 through 504, which is the existing program. On the second page, we come to the first change the bill suggests, which is on line 6 in 502. We add a definition for dependent. We had some discussion in the interim about what is a dependent. Fortunately for us, we have a defense enrollment eligibility reporting system that the federal government runs. You can't just call anybody a dependent. You actually have to go through a rather onerous process. You have to prove your spouse is really your spouse with marriage certificates. If it's a dependent and it's your child, you have to have birth certificates naming you as a parent. You can have dependents that are wards or elderly parents, but you have to go through a whole process showing a court order that they need, that you basically are their guardian. So the definition here is very simple because DEERS, Defense Enrollment Eligibility Reporting System, already has a process to do that. So you will be in a federal system to be a dependent. So we don't have to have a long-winded description of dependent. So then the bill on page 2, moving on, changes 19.9503 of the existing statute, which then starts a series of changes in this section to say the member of the National Guard or the spouse or dependent of an active member. So that changes carries on page 3, line 17, where again, we're just adding spouses or dependents. Line 22 on page 3, the same. So really, all of the changes on the second half of 2, 3, and all the way down to line 19 on page 4 is just to say not only the members, but a spouse or a dependent. So then when you get down to line 19, this is where we get into the meat of the bill, which essentially says, if you're satisfactorily participating, so in other words, we're not after you because you're AWOL or something because we haven't seen you in a while, and you've completed your initial mandatory obligation, you may transfer, and you go on to page 5 at line 1, to a spouse or dependent, the benefits in this program, only if you agree in writing down there in lines 5 and 6 to not less than an additional 4 years of service. So if you come in and you owe us 6 years, if you want to transfer this, you're going to owe us another 4. If you want to transfer to a spouse or a dependent. And as it says down line 8 and following on page 5, the 4-year period of service is in addition to the 6-year commitment required for you to be part of the program. So basically, we're getting people to the 10-year point. So essentially, from a retention point of view, our feeling is if we get you to 10 years of a typical 20-year military service, you're probably pretty committed. You're halfway there. So this would do that if you wanted to transfer the benefit to a spouse or dependent. Down on page 6, continuing on page 6, we then add in spouse or dependent in the language already about the participation required. And then really on page 7, we get into, again, the meat of this. Essentially, if you fail to meet your military commitment as the member, you owe the money back. There is a waiver process if it's a hardship. You have a medical problem that comes up and no fault of your own, you can't meet your military commitment that you signed up for. You can ask to waive the repayment. This would also apply to the spouse or dependent. So if somewhere in that additional 4-year period, you're no longer meeting your military service obligation, you could be required to pay it back. And that's what this does. That's part of the existing program. We're just applying it now to spouses and dependents. Then on line 12 on page 7, this is an additional piece of this, which allows you to go to one additional degree if you already have one. And this is an expansion of the program as well. This is for the member or spouse. Again, we're just trying to hit the retention. If you're willing to sign up for an additional 4-year period, then you can get an additional degree. So in my case, when I came into the Guard with already a doctorate equivalent degree, I might have been able to justify getting another degree that the current program would not pay for. And then on line 8 is section 2, which is the appropriation, and it is $745,529. This is an estimation that this could expand the existing program by 50 to 60%. That was what the working group came up with, what our recruiters and other folks who are involved in the tuition program. It's really a guess because we've never done this before. We're thinking if we expand it to a spouse or a dependent, it could increase the program by as much as 50 or 60%, which is what this number is. And then once again, the act is effective on July 1st of 23. I will say in section 2 on page 8, as was discussed by the committee in the other bill, this is an appropriation only to go through June of 24, and then it would go into our normal budget as an increased request to fund the program to continue it. With that, I'll stand for the committee's questions.
Mr. Smith, so I will just go ahead. We did get the rough, and I will just let the committee know you were provided a rough amendment. This was about a 10-minute deal by our amazing LSO fiscal team. Can you give us just a very brief explanation of why we have that amendment in front of us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So the current bill, as it came out of the interim, did not include any personnel costs to run the program. What's interesting about that, as we were working these various bills, this program is probably has the probability of being the most administratively onerous, because the way this works is you enroll in the school, you have to get into the program, you have to provide a lot of documentation. Then the school has to essentially send a bill to the state, to us in the military department, for those people enrolled in the program to pay that tuition and fees. So there's a lot of administrative costs to this. So as we looked at the three bills that we've talked about today that add an administrative cost to the military department, this is really the one that needs the body. If this is passed, this is the one that is going to need a full-time equivalent, and that's what this amendment does. Probably should have in the interim thought about this and added it to the bill in the interim. It is a fairly costly amendment, because with salary and benefits for someone to run this program, we're talking $130,000. And then there's some one-time costs, because you're going to have to set up potentially a website. So we went to ETS, got an estimate. They were saying $104,000 in one-time costs to set up a program, a spreadsheet, a website presence to run this program. And then an additional $5,412 is all it costs year to year once you have all that set up. But that's to buy a computer, to buy the software, to create the spreadsheet, because obviously with this program, we need to have a lot of accountability. It needs to be auditable. We can't just do this by the seat of our pants. We can't just write this on the back of a napkin. We need to have the computer support to do that. So, Mr. Chairman, that's what I understand the amendment's trying to do.
And you also in the Senate had a piece of a full-time employee removed from another bill, correct? In an effort, I'll just explain what you guys have explained to me. So the military department came to me and explained to me that they had another half-time FTE in a bill with the Senate that is expanding a portion of what this committee had decided to do. The Senate appropriations team looked at this and said, it kind of seems silly to have a half-time employee when you're doing something so small. Why don't we go ahead and remove it out of here and put it where it actually needs to be? Because what they're going to end up doing is having one full-time employee basically carry the weight for most of these programs, right? And so with one full-time employee running the majority of these issues, this seems to be the most likely candidate and the most effective place to place this person. So that's why you see the full-time employee being added into this bill, as well as their information here. I will reserve my comments on ETS, but also the 104,000 that you see in the amendment on section C here, and I did not provide you guys a copy. I do have a copy for you. There's 109,000 set up. 104 of that is one time only. And then the remaining 5,000 would be included in their annual budget. So, and then the typical language, as stated earlier in section D, is that it should not be used for anything else, and it will be reverted if it's not used. So that's the meat of this amendment, and we can go through that once we go any further. So any questions on the bill for the committee? I had Representative Stivar and then Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So like this halftime position on the one we just did, that's 48,000. So that will go away and be added in to this one.
Colonel Smith?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiver, that is our intent. Again, Senate File 53 is the medical insurance reimbursement program that I know Representative Stiver and the committee members from the interim are aware of. That's the one where it was $20,000. It was a small program. It really didn't justify a halftime person. So the Senate appropriations took that out on our recommendation. And then we would like to add it into this one where it really needs to be.
Representative Pendergraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Easy question this time. Colonel, you said when you got in, you had a Juris Doctorate. Was that correct? Or a doctor?
Smith?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, yes, I have a Bachelor of Arts and a Juris Doctor degree.
So the question then is, coming into that with a rather prestigious degree, were you paid more? Did you get an automatic rank bump above your peers who were just entering? How does that work?
Colonel?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, no, there is no professional pay for attorneys. There are for doctors, but we do get when you come in active duty, you do get a little ahead. They give you 3-year service credit, so you make captain quicker, but you still get paid like every other captain.
I just had a point for clarification. I'm just trying to get in my own mind, if I may. A kind of a balance sheet. If we hire somebody who already has a degree, do we have to pay them more and then turn around and pay their spouse to get their degree as well? That's all I'm curious about.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, I guess in a sense you could see it that way, but if you qualify for whatever MOS or AFSC specialty code, that requirement's the requirement. I mean,
Representative Stivar?
I'll get offline.
Okay. Representative Nemec. I will get this right. I promise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel Smith, just a question on if the National Guard member reenlists for that 4 years and transfers those benefits to a spouse and that member dies, is that a hardship that
Colonel
would
Smith.
continue?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Nemec, there is a waiver process. So one of the things I failed to mention, this program already in 19.9.501 says that the Adjutant General will promulgate rules for administration, implementation, and utilization. We'll have to amend those rules if this passes to include this expansion. But in that, there is a waiver process for things like that, to basically ask, in this case, General Porter as the Adjutant General, given these facts and circumstances, will you waive the repayment? Because person can't meet their obligation. And that has been done in the past, and that is already in our rules.
Any further questions from the committee? Gentlemen, thank you so much. We'll open this up for public comment now. And since I'll just do this as the chair's prerogative, please refresh your memory with Mr. Winnie's comments. We're refreshing our minds. Okay, we've got Mr. Winnie's comments. Dale, anything else to add? All right. Support. All right. So seeing no further questions, and I do not believe she's online any longer. So we'll go ahead and close public comment. Committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by O'Hearn. Seconded by Nemec. Committee, I am going to go ahead and move the proposed amendment language. I will tell you right now, as this was done on the fly, there will be a slight modification when the attorneys get their hands on it. So it will be cleaned up. But this was done by Don Richards to make sure that it was at least something that I could put in front of you, so it wasn't just an arbitrary amendment. You guys just had to trust your chairman. So I will go ahead and move the proposed amendment, and I will get this with you, Diana, if it's approved.
Second?
Seconded by O'Hearn. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Pendergraft. Okay. Seeing no discussion on the amendment, all those in favor of the proposed amendment to House Bill 59, go ahead and say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Proposed amendment to House Bill 59 is adopted. Quickly, we will go ahead and try to work through the rest of this and see if there's any other questions. So let's go to page 1, page 2, 3, 4. Notice the effective subsection on page 4 is repealed on July 1st, 2026, so time-limited program as well. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong bill, guys. My apologies. I am totally on the wrong bill. There we go. I'm back on the right bill. Yeah, no, I was in the 39 still. So we were on 4, 5. This is the additional 4-year commitment. 6, 7, 8.
Can I, Mr. Chairman,
Certainly, Vice Chair O'Hearn.
there was a question about 55 to 60%. You figured you're using about $150,000, so you added 50 to 60%. Representative Weil and I were just talking, Wiley, we're just wondering if we could drop that, and if you use more, we could add more to it. To make it
General
more
or
palatable on the
Colonel?
thing.
Mr. Chairman, I'll take a stab at it first, but Representative Hearn, the current program is budgeted for 1.2 million for the biennium. We've asked for an additional 400,000 because it's being used more than has been in the past. So we were looking at approximate, I'm rounding numbers, approximately 1.6 million for the biennium, which is about 800,000 for 1 year. So certainly that's what we're doing under the current program. We've run out of money because it's become very popular. Additionally, as this committee probably knows very well, Wyoming schools have seen fairly large increases in tuition and fees in the last couple of years. So even without the increase in participation, we're running out of money in the current program. So I don't know if that went to your question, Representative O'Hearn, but.
Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
All right. Any other discussion on the bill? Representative Pendergraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to vote yes on this bill, but with some reservations. And I will be approaching the podium on the floor and offering some amendments, and I'll just kind of give you a heads up out of fairness. I like the idea that as a recruiting tool that you can get an education out of it. I took some advantage of that myself. If I already have an education, I kind of like the idea of being able to pass that off to my spouse. If I have an education, I can't do that, then that loosens the effectiveness. The problem comes in when the next generation comes. What happens when it's time to recruit them and they say, I've already got my stuff? You know, it creates a perpetual. So I guess that's one of my sticking points.
General, if you'd like.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Representative Pendergraft. I would say, as we're looking at the population here, it's probably mostly spouses that we're going to have. We're talking about that initial 6 years. We don't have too many that have dependents at that time. Not to say that couldn't happen, but that was a discussion that happened in the group too. Is hey, are we incentivizing that away? And what we ultimately came to was the impact would not be as prevalent as what you think. We think that's mostly going to be for spouses, given the age group of the folks we're trying that are going to be taking advantage of this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, committee, we are really crushing in on time. So I'm going to close comment here and ask a question has been called. Diana, if you can please call roll on House Bill 59 as amended.
Okay, Representative Berger,
Aye.
Representative Nemec,
Aye.
Representative Obermuller. Aye. Representative O'Hearn,
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft,
Aye.
Representative Smith,
No.
Representative Stivar submitted an absentee ballot, but he put the wrong bill number on the bill, so we're not.
I will accept because he knows what he was voting on. So,
Okay, and it was no.
okay.
Representative Wiley,
Aye.
Chairman Brown.
Aye.
Okay, 7 ayes, 2 noes, do pass with amendment.
Thank you, Diana. Committee, that's all we're going to get to today. Department of Ed, thank you so much for your time. We will see you guys. I will move that bill over to Thursday or Tuesday. That'll be our first bill up. So thank you so much.